What's going on, Soccer family? It's your boy JC. Hope you can hear me. Yeah. Hope the sound is coming loud and clear. So yeah, so we are speaking Scotland today, family. It's your boy JC. So we got some great guests for you today, family. Our friend, our brother now in Christ, the AP, the Apostate Prophet, the Iceman, obviously in the house. Yes, Billy here. Yeah, we're going live. We're live now, Bob. Bob, we're live. Big day, the Dawa Doctor in the house.
In the building.
That's right.
We're getting ready for surgery.
That's right. Here we are with our brother in Christ now, yeah?
Just around Brother Ridvan, can you block up this route? Can you come in? Yeah. Just block up this route and watch who's, just be wary of who's trying to push past you.
It's all good. Family, like and share the link. Show your support. Love you all.
Just while we're live, I just want to tell you all. I am not funded by Soko Films or Revelations 22:13. And neither of these my channels or Speakers Corner
Revival.
My own channel,
Kingdom Corner. Yeah, don't forget that.
Channel is Bob Speakers Corner.
Yeah, subscribe, family, support him.
So,
Stop it, Whiting.
brothers and sisters,
Yes.
we're joined today
By who?
by Ridvan Apostate Prophet,
Yeah. Come on, Liverpool.
pointing the way for Muslims and atheists
All right.
towards Jesus.
Yeah.
So, Ridvan, do you just want to tell us a little bit about what was it that led you out of Islam?
Is this loud enough?
Yeah.
Try and talk to David at the back there.
Hey, what's up?
To Big Dave, the Dawa Doctor.
Try and talk to David and you'll be speaking loud.
Big Dave, the Dawa Doctor.
So I'm not used to shouting. I usually speak very quietly.
I know.
So
But make an effort.
It's going to be a big effort here. But wait, what was the question?
What was it that led you out of Islam?
Okay, so it was mainly, well, first off, it was reading the Quran and encountering the scientific issues. Because we are told that the Quran is the perfect dictated word of Allah. And then you start reading it and you see that the description of the natural world around us is one that is not very intelligent, you know, one that is not very much in line with how we actually know the natural world to be. So things like the descriptions of the stars, the sun, the sky, and all that were the first things that were. Well, you know, for example, it says that.
Allah shoots.
It gives an evidence, for example, that it is Allah who creates, and it says this is clearly an appeal to the natural world as evidence. And it says, and look at the sky. Do you see any cracks in it? And on the surface, it's like, okay, there's nothing necessarily wrong about it, but it is Allah Himself who directly makes a statement there, and who says, see, this is evidence that Allah created it all. Look at this sky. How perfectly He made it. Do you see any crack in it? Now, if you think a little bit further about the sky, it's like there wouldn't be a scenario where there's a visible crack in the sky, right?
Yeah.
I mean, it would be a thing if the sky was what people used to think.
Yeah.
This solid ceiling that might break at some point, for example. Other examples are the infamous example of the story of Dhul-Qarnayn, where the sun goes and sets into a muddy spring, or a hot spring, or a dark spring, or it rises at a place where there are people close to it, that have no protection to it, and Dhul-Qarnayn goes and helps it. There is no such place.
Yeah.
There is no such place where the sun goes into a muddy spring. Now there are Muslim interpreters later on who have interpreted this as metaphorical. But the issue is the earliest interpretations, the earliest exegesis of those verses, for example, specifically the one where it talks about the sun setting in a muddy spring. Tabari, for example, never ever mentions this as something metaphorical. It talks about the sun setting into a muddy spring, and then it talks about there is debate about whether it's a dark spring, a hot spring, a muddy spring, and so on. And
So they're
exactly
debating what kind of spring it is.
Exactly.
Not whether it sets in a spring.
Yeah. So they're not debating also if this is metaphorical, if there's some deeper meaning behind it, but rather the specifications of this certain spring, for example. Of course, later when Muslims began to understand that the world isn't quite the way that 7th century Arabs thought it was, they started making reinterpretations of this stuff.
Yeah.
So things like these, many things like this, or Allah shooting the angels, shooting the stars at rebellious devils that try to go up, sneak up and get secret information. The High Council of Allah, where he secretly discusses things with the angels. Things like that led me down a path of questioning. But the big issue was actually, and yes, I'm sure that there are some other people who will have a problem with this aspect, but the bigger issue was actually that there is some great injustice at play when it comes to Allah's cosmic eternal plan. Now, in Christianity, for example, there are great understandings and interpretations of the eschaton, of the eschatology, of the afterlife, and all of that, because it is rather open to interpretation in many ways, you could say, in the Bible. In the Quran doesn't leave anything at all up to interpretation. It's very clear. Allah created humans just so they worship Him, and for no other reason. And He created those who do not worship Him just so they can burn in hell. And those people are less than they're less than cattle. They're the worst of creatures, those who disbelieve in Allah. And He created them just so they can burn in hell forever. And it goes very clearly and repeatedly into very graphic descriptions of what Allah will do to those people. So He creates specific people just so He can burn them forever. They are dumb as heck. They have no choice. And He punishes them and tortures them and skins them alive and burns their skin and restores their skin so that they can feel the pain over and over and over again. So one aspect is, of course, the scientific issue, the ignorance, if you want to call it like that, and the other is the injustice. And once I allowed myself to basically question and to ask questions, because the Quran says that it is Allah who creates my brain, who allows me to ask questions, right? So how can I be blamed if I ask these questions and come to a conclusion that is not really very much in line with Allah? That path really opens the way out.
Okay, so before I ask you my next question, and I'll give you time to think about it while I speak, which will be then what was it that led you into atheism? But while he enumerates his memories on that, I just want to build on the scientific errors in the Quran. Because the Quran makes the claim that if this book was from any other than Allah, then the non-believers, the Jews, the Christians, they would find many contradictions and errors in it. But the Quran describes the world as flat. It says that sperm is produced between your backbone and your ribs. I don't know about you gentlemen, but if any of you are producing sperm between your backbones and your ribs, you've got serious problems and you need to go and see a doctor.
I checked. It's not true.
It's not true. It really isn't. It says things like it's impossible for a human being to have two hearts, because obviously the author of the Quran never knew about Siamese twins. It says things like, as Ridvan has already said, that the sun sets in a puddle of mud. The hadiths talk about Allah descending from the highest to the lowest heaven
at night
to hear the prayers at night and then goes back up in the morning. The problem with that is that only makes sense if you think the earth's flat.
Yeah.
There's many errors in the Quran. It doesn't even describe Christian beliefs properly. In the 7th century, Christian beliefs about the Trinity were well known, but the Quran seems to think we believed in 3 gods and that Mary was one of those gods. It contradicts history, such as the crucifixion of Jesus. So this book that claims to be free of errors is full of them. full of them. And there's many Muslims in this park that are waking up to this reality.
Oh yeah.
Right? We've got one here, we've got one here, we've got one there. We know about others in the park. The Muslims don't know about some of the others in the park, but we know about some of the others in the park.
I do. I know a lot of them
Yeah,
now.
exactly. So
There is a lot.
but the second thing is that Islam as a religion is deeply unjust. The God that they believe in is a fickle God who decides what he wills to bless who he wants and curse who he wants, just because that's how he decides to do it. And there's no other reason than the fact that he's in charge. That's fickle Pablo Escobar kind of theology. And their Sharia law results in discrimination and persecution against religious minorities. So these are some of the reasons that we offer to Muslims who might be watching this, that you too should be rejecting Islam. So Ridvan, why don't you...
I want to add two things here.
Yeah, go on.
So two things. One of them is you brought up the ignorance about the religious beliefs of Christians, for example. But along those lines, in chapter 9, verse 30 of the Quran, it very clearly says, and the Jews say Ezra is the son of Allah, or the Jews say Uzair is the son of Allah. Now, I have interacted with a lot of Jews. I have met a lot of Jews, and I'm sure there are some here somewhere. Go and ask them what that means. Go and ask them what exactly that is supposed to mean. Go ask them if they know of any Jew ever who believed that Uzair or Ezra is the son of Allah. Nobody knows what you're talking about. No, I went to Israel to ask this question. Nobody knows what anyone is talking about. So the Quran makes a strange claim there. I'm not sure how exactly that came into existence. Muslims themselves have big trouble explaining that. It might be that that the Jews were trolling Muhammad and Muhammad took it seriously, I don't know. But it says the Jews say Ezra is the son of Allah. This is clearly a false statement. And there is no way to explain it. Muslims struggle to explain it, but they can never really explain it. It is an obvious flaw in the Quran. Another thing about the science aspect to add here, which is a while ago, I think it was like 2 or 3 years ago, right? I had an interaction with Ali Dawa that went on for several hours. I spent an hour asking him the same question.
Where does the sun
and
go?
he would not answer the question. It was, where does the sun go at night? I asked him this question because in the hadiths, in the authentic hadith, Muhammad clearly says to one of his companions,
Abu
Dhar, he says, do you know where this goes, pointing at the sun? Abu Dhar says, Allah and his messenger know best. Muhammad then says it goes and travels until it prostrates itself underneath the throne of Allah and then asks for permission to rise again, upon which Allah gives it permission to rise. But one day Allah will not give it permission to rise, so it will go back from where it came from and the sun will rise from the west. This only works if the sun actually actively travels somewhere. There is no other explanation.
It's in Bukhari 3199.
So I asked Ali
Bukhari,
Dawa repeatedly, can you tell me where the sun goes at night? And for an hour, he would not answer the question. He would not answer the question.
For 1 hour.
You've also got the fact that the Quran. You've also got the fact that the Quran says that Gog and Magog are two peoples that are kept behind a wall. Where is this wall? We've mapped the entire earth.
Billy knows.
It's found in the Alexander the Great romance that was made centuries after Alexander the Great and was lingering across the trade route and in Arabia at the time. It was commonly recited. You can buy the book in Waterstone.
The story, yes, but where's the wall? If the Quran is an accurate book and it says Gog and Magog are behind a wall, why can't we find the wall? It's like we can all find the Great Wall of China. We can all find Adrian's wall. We can all find Antonia's wall. So where's this great wall that hides Gog and Magog? It also says in the Quran.
What does it say?
It also says in the Quran that the sun does not overtake the moon and the moon does not overtake the sun. That means that solar eclipses shouldn't happen according to the Quran.
Right.
But yet we all know that solar eclipses do happen because night does overtake day in a solar eclipse, which directly contradicts the plain teaching of the Quran. Do you want to jump in with any more before we move on?
We can move on. I wanted to say something, but I forgot.
Right. So why don't you tell us all what led you into atheism?
So It was a little bit more shallow, I would say, compared to my leaving Islam. But it was basically, I spent a year or so after leaving Islam trying to understand what I'm supposed to do now with my life, because from very early childhood, I learned that Islam is the ultimate meaning of my life, and that's what everything is about. And I was heavily indoctrinated with it. So I was left with the question, Islam is not true, but what about any other religion? What if maybe there isn't, maybe God is real. So I didn't really have a position on whether God is real or not in the beginnings. I tried to look into other religions. I tried to look into Christianity. I tried to look into different religions. I didn't go too thoroughly into them. I'm not going to stand here and say, oh, I studied all the different religions and none of them made sense. No, I played with the thought of God, and I thought to myself, there are so many different cultures around the world that seem to all have different religious beliefs, and it doesn't seem to make sense to me that this circle, for example, this geographic region has this religious belief, and that religious belief happens to be true, whereas those other people over there have different religious beliefs, and they just happen to be born into the wrong religious beliefs and happen to be condemned. So thoughts like these led me to the idea that there most likely is not a God, and at the peak of my atheism, my stance was that if I can say that there is most likely no God, then my idea of the question of theism would be answered with,
Hit the like.
if people say there is a God, it is just a suggestion that they are making due to with a lack of evidence, which I can dismiss with the whole idea, if there's not enough evidence, you can dismiss it. So I can say atheism is probably the correct answer. But the issue is,
We'll come to why you left it.
it was very torturous.
We'll come to why you left it in a second. But I think what this highlights for us as Christians is the need to be doing effective evangelism. To actually be engaging with the questions that people like Ridvan were asking at the time that he became an atheist. There is this school of thought in evangelism that says what you should do is you go out and you shout at everybody saying, you're a sinner, Jesus died for your sins, and if you put your faith in Jesus, you can go to heaven and not to hell. That kind of evangelism isn't addressing the questions that people were asking. As you can see, Ridvan was not asking any question related to that kind of gospel presentation. And so it becomes incumbent upon Christians to address the kinds of questions that people are asking rather than to talk at them about the thing that we want to talk about. So with regards to, just ignore him, he's a trite man. He's a trite man. He's a trite man who just heckles, he doesn't engage in real conversation.
You literally just said,
so ladies and gentlemen,
questions. I said I have a question.
so when, bro, we both know at the end of this,
What's that, mate?
no, bro, we're not doing your conversation. Yeah, we're not doing your conversation. We're not doing your conversation. And we both know you're a pathetic being. But the moment I come and challenge you to a debate, you will run away like a coward that you are. You just stand there and heckle. But then the moment you get challenged, you run like a moral coward. Anyway.
Be cool, Bob, be cool. It's a nice day,
So,
Bob.
ladies and gentlemen,
Yeah.
when it comes to this cultural question that Ridvad were asking, we Christians do have an answer. It is that the kingdom of God is invading this world. It is invading this world to take it from the Prince of Darkness. It is invading this world to take it from the God of this world, that is Satan. That there is a dominion of principalities and powers by which the kingdom of God is meant to overthrow, because these are the principalities and powers that we are at war against. And so from within a Christian worldview, it makes sense that we would expect to see that some territory, some land was in the possession of demons, and that other parts of land were in the possession of God and his kingdom. And the point of the Christian church is to advance that kingdom into all areas, into all lands that do not yet bow the knee at the name of Jesus. Okay, so tell us, Ridvan, what do you want to add to anything on that?
No.
Okay, what led you out of atheism and into Christianity?
Now, I rarely talk about this. In fact, I haven't really talked about this in depth because
Do it now.
the thing is,
Speaker's Corner special.
I kind of still want to wait with this question until I'm at a certain point where I can properly answer this question, because I had a great change of mind in terms of how I approach things, because for 10 years when I was obsessed with skepticism and with atheism and with I have to have hard evidence for everything, hard proof for everything. My idea was, I need to know whether something is true or not before I step into it. I need to know for certain that it is 100% true, and I have to have the piece of evidence. I need to hold it. I need to grab it before I make a step into it. And I abandoned that whole idea recently, actually, because I had a long conversation with a great faithful man that I have a lot of respect for, who is very close to me now and who helped me a lot in my journey through Christianity. But he basically sat down with me and he asked me some questions about where exactly my skepticism brought me in life, and whether I think that my reliance on 100% proof and constant skepticism is actually going to lead me somewhere, if it's actually going to lead me to success. So he asked me some questions to self-reflect, and I thought to myself, I have actually gone around online especially for years saying, hey, I'm an atheist, I don't believe in this, I don't believe in that, but hey, I'm completely happy, I'm cheerful and all that. It wasn't true. The entire time, people who were close to me knew that I was very, very depressed. I was very depressed. I was on a path of self-destruction. I found meaning in denying and attacking other people's beliefs instead of identifying with my own beliefs. And unfortunately, I see a lot of people who now criticize me for embracing Christianity, still engaging in that. They find meaning in attacking other people's beliefs instead. I found meaning in attacking or criticizing Islam because I thought it is a great evil and great wrong in this world, and I still believe in that. But I didn't really find meaning in just in dedicating the rest of my life to simply denigrating other people's beliefs, and here I will exclude Islam, and saying they are wrong and I am right. I think all it left me with was depression and emptiness. As much as I said I'm happy, I was left with emptiness. On the one hand, I was telling myself there is no meaning in life, there is no inherent meaning, but that's okay, I'm fine with it. I will just embrace the lack of meaninglessness. But then on the other hand, I was constantly looking for meaning. I was constantly looking for meaningful interactions, a meaningful place in the world, and always thinking to myself, I am in this world that obviously seems to have some deeper meaning. It is kind of strange to accept that I'm just floating in this universe that seems to have a lot of meaning with a trajectory of meaninglessness toward destruction. With my skeptic mind, where I want to always go for 100% proof, and in the end I will die just like you and you and you and you, and all I will be left with is ignorance and death, that's it. So I thought to myself, what if instead of thinking that I am the genius, that I am the all-knower, that I am the one who has to have all the answers, what if I have some humility and shut up for once and actually listen to some knowledge and listen to some people. And the funny thing is, after doing that, I started actually encountering some of the facts, some of the hard facts regarding Christianity, and some of the lies that have been spread, some of the lies that are still spread in Muslim spheres and in anti-theist spheres, such as when it comes to the story of Paul, for example. Muslims will say that Paul is somebody who fabricated or who created, who established the story of Christianity, who established the story of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit, and all that. When in reality, you look at the facts and you see that Paul closely and deeply interacted with the disciples, with the apostles, whom Jesus himself directly picked and appointed, whom he gave the keys to. He directly interacted with them they together worked. We know this now as a matter of fact. We know that this is historical.
Yeah.
We know that the epistle to Romans was written by Paul himself. We know that he wrote there that Jesus is God over all. We know that he wrote this as he was in the company of the approval of the disciples, the apostles themselves. So with Muslims, for example, if they want to trust Jesus, they should also trust the New Testament.
Yeah.
They should also trust the writings of Paul, because Jesus entrusted his message to the apostles, to his disciples, who entrusted it to Paul and to each other, who gave us Christianity as it is today. And many atheists go around saying, oh, there is no evidence. These are just things written by people. We haven't even met Jesus. We haven't even seen any of these things. These writings were written down by people who directly witnessed Jesus, who directly witnessed Jesus dying on the cross. Even Bart Ehrman, the top scholar who goes against the Christian narrative. I invited Bart Ehrman myself twice. I asked him about it, and he said, it is very clear that Jesus was alive, that Jesus was crucified, that Jesus died, and that people witnessed the resurrection.
Did you all hear that?
Repeat it.
Bart Ehrman, the apostate. Bart Ehrman, the critic of Christianity. Bart Ehrman,
the friends with the
polemicist against the church, says that historically speaking, we can have as established Jesus Christ was a real human being, was truly crucified, was what did you say? Was truly crucified, a real person, truly taught, truly crucified, and people saw what they believed to be the resurrection of Christ.
Now his
As historical information.
Now Bart Ehrman's explanation to that is that it might have been a mass hallucination, it might have been mass hysteria, it might have been emotionally induced. But the thing is, this is a very, I mean, no offense to Bart Ehrman, I still have a lot of respect for him. I talked to him twice, he's a very nice guy. But it seems to be a very poor explanation, you know. It is a very poor explanation and very unique actually in history that so many people, dozens, if not hundreds of people, according to the text, would come together and would have hallucinations of somebody walking around again after he's obviously killed on the cross. So, yeah.
I'm already involved. Would you like a question? Would you like to open this question?
Go on. You've got to allow for cognitive bias, yeah? And I'm not anti-Christian, I like the ethic, right? So I'm not here to bash. But you've got to try and be objective as well. And we'd all love to believe this narrative. Yeah, we'd love to believe the narrative of the miracle and the afterlife, etc. And therefore I should be aware of my cognitive bias. Now this is framed in purely anecdotal evidence. We've got 3,000 religions on the planet, I hear. All of their religious books are based on anecdotal evidence, essentially. It doesn't mean they're wrong, but in terms of evidence,
what does it matter?
You've got to accept that anecdotal evidence is less powerful than, say, empirical evidence or even inferential evidence.
Can I just respond to that?
Go on, Bob.
Firstly,
Go on, Bob.
Let's be clear.
Yeah.
Let's be clear. Empirical evidence is only powerful when it comes to things that can be disproved.
Empirically.
The scientific method is based upon understanding material causes for material events, based upon hypotheses, based upon a principle of falsification.
Okay.
The problem with miracles is that they are not based upon material causes for material effects. They are based upon a non-material cause for a material effect. In other words, you can't reproduce them and you can't falsify them. That also means that scientific inquiry is only strong when it talks about the material world. It is weak when it talks about miracles. And as for cognitive bias, the questioner himself demonstrates cognitive bias because he is assuming the norms of Western civilization that prioritizes the idea that all things should be subject to scientific inquiry, and that itself is a form of cognitive bias. There's nothing wrong with having a culture. There's nothing wrong with having an inheritance. The question is, what can guide us to life? And what Ridvan pointed out was that atheism didn't give us that. It basically says that the world is meaning, that you are dust and you shall return unto dust, and that is the fullness of your life. But yet we encounter a world that is full of meaning. And if it is full of meaning, brothers and sisters, that contradicts the atheistic worldview. The atheistic worldview is not sufficient to explain the experience of life. And atheists themselves live in contradiction to it. Do you want to... Wait, no.
I want to just talk about one aspect here. So in the question, there was one element, which is actually a very popular narrative that is mostly repeated online circles. It is something about there are 3,000 different religions, or variations of this are that there are so many thousands of gods. So which one? I want to address one thing about this. Now, it might seem very impressive on the surface among online atheists, for example, to ask this question, but there are so many thousands of gods, which one? Or so many thousands of religions, which one? Well, over 50% of the human population on this planet believes in a religion, in a religion that is related to the Bible message or to the Abrahamic God, to the God of Abraham. Now, I wouldn't call Islam necessarily an Abrahamic religion. I wouldn't even say that Muslims believe in the God of Abraham or the God of the Bible. However, even Islam is in some way related to the God of the Bible, is in some way related to the Bible narrative, right? So the majority of the human population believes in something that is related to this. So it is kind of ludicrous to, and when you go outside of that, you only have very few religions that actually contest these religions in terms of the numbers. So if you want to compare this God to those thousands of other gods, of which nobody even knows, of which in which nobody even believes. So it is a strange comparison to make, because one of them is obviously very relevant and very important in the history, in the narrative of faith, in the history of the world, and it could be inferred that there is a reason why this God that we are talking about is so important in the history of this world. It could be that this God relates to actual truths, as opposed to so many other entities or alleged beings that are not about truth and that nobody knows about, and that do not play a role in the world. And there are some people who spend their miserable existence like this guy.
Yeah. Yeah, boo.
Really, I'm trying to point out.
So to respond on your point.
Talk to everybody.
Sorry.
Yeah, loud.
Okay, I'm happy to accept Christianity is an preeminent religion. And it communicates a lot of moral, ethical, and potentially metaphysical truth.
Good. So far, so good.
However, simultaneously, all I was trying to point out was its evidence is anecdotal. Yes, it's a fact. It doesn't mean the evidence is wrong. It should be taken in the epistemological context it exists in, which is it's anecdotal. So effectively, it's a form of hearsay. Yeah? However, so that when we're talking about miracles, Bob is quite right that scientists deal with physics, they deal with matter and energy. Miracles, I think I'm quoting you correctly, they are not caused by physical things. I think you said that, and I think you're correct in the supposition. If your premise is true, I go with it. However, the effects that they have are physical. For example, a man walking on water, that is empirically measurable. So you have to return to the question. Right? Hello?
You lost them.
Okay. I'm now chucking back the question to you guys. What is your, given that miracles manifest at a physical level, even though they may have a metaphysical core, what is your best empirical evidence for miracles? And I think if you're honest, the answer is going to be not a lot. That doesn't mean you're wrong. It's just honest. So therefore, what you have is anecdotal text of people who you may want to take seriously and they may be correct. And then you've got a lot of inferential arguments, like the cosmological argument, etc., which you can add into the equation. That's honest as well. But at the purely empirical level, none of these 3,000 religions have got really very much
Land, Tony, land.
Okay, so allow us to reply. Firstly, there's absolutely nothing wrong with anecdotal evidence.
Okay.
We literally send people to prison for the rest of their lives on the basis of anecdotal evidence. We live our lives every day on anecdotal evidence. Countless matters are demonstrated through anecdotal evidence. The reality is that anecdotal evidence is the main form of evidence that we all use. The idea of empirical evidence within a structured system is something that only emerged in around the 1800s. And the 1900s, and you get the first glimpses of it in the late 1600s. Started to develop through the 1700s inside a Christian milieu. In other words, you wouldn't have modern science if it wasn't for Christianity.
That's right.
You can thank Christians later.
Yes, the Catholic bishops.
Ladies and gentlemen. No, ladies and gentlemen.
Yeah.
The reality of the resurrection is based upon the transformation of the apostles' lives. The apostles lived in a time when they did not believe that a single individual would be resurrected. They believed in a general resurrection, but not in a singular resurrection. They believed that their Messiah was dead, crucified, and that, ladies and gentlemen, they were well prepared to deal with. They had cultural norms with which to deal with the idea of a murdered Messiah, of a murdered teacher. They would venerate his tomb. They would honor his teachings. They'd already done that with the prophets before. They did that with their great rabbis. But something happened that dramatically changed their lives, including the Apostle Paul, who went from persecuting the church to being one of its chief missionaries.
That's right.
Now, ladies and gentlemen, imagine that you're going through a field and you see a light zipping from left to right, backwards and forwards, and then it shoots up in the air. What do you think that you've seen? Most people will go, a UFO, because culturally we've been conditioned to think that that's what might be happening. But, ladies and gentlemen, something happened to the first apostles that radically changed their worldview. He asked for evidence of miracles. There's countless examples where doctors have said, you've been cured and we don't know why. They're connected to people praying. I personally know of at least 2 people, disabled and in a wheelchair, who through prayer have got up and walked again. One of them used to come to this park, and if memory serves me correct, the other one is Wes Huff, and I'm sorry, Wes, if I've got the name, I've got you mixed up with someone else. But the point is, there are documented miracles. Ladies and gentlemen.
They are.
My question for this brother, after Ridvan responds, is this. What happened to the Apostle Paul for him to go from chief Christopher, from chief persecutor of the church, to being its chief evangelist? What changed his mind to the point that he died for the religion that he persecuted? What changed him?
He knows.
Explain that for us.
He knows.
Friedman, do you want to reply?
Oh, AP.
Very few things. One of them is the early history of Christianity is very well known historically to be a history of persecution, of being persecuted, of dying for the faith. Unlike Islam, for example, which is an imperialist religion, which started out as a religion of conquest, and bloodshed, Christianity started out as a religion of going and preaching, putting your life on the line, being brutally murdered, and then others continuing, knowing that they are going to die as well. I recently came across, as a new Christian, the story of Ignatius of Antioch, also known as Saint Ignatius, who knew that he was going to be sent to his death. Despite that, on his way to his death, he wrote very famous letters in which he expressed his love for Christ, in which he expressed his love for the people, for the church, and he begged not to be saved, not to be spared from death, not to be saved from his death, because it was the best thing he could experience. This is how the early Christians were. This is how the apostles were. This is what the disciples experienced. They died for the truth. Most of them were killed somehow. They died for the truth. They died for what they believed to be true. And most of these early Christians died not only for what they heard to be true, they died for what they knew to be true, what they directly heard from Christ himself, what they heard from the contemporaries of Christ himself, what they directly witnessed, what they directly saw. They died for what they knew to be true, and they couldn't be convinced otherwise. Now, when it comes to the whole issue of empirical evidence, I have to say one thing. There is a great sickness, a great disease, if you will, in the West that has recently formed, quite recently, that is an over-reliance on the human mind and on empirical evidence about every single thing. And you always go with it. You think, oh, the evidence points at this, so I'm going to accept this as truth. Later on, you have the evidence changing and pointing at something else, so you want to go for that. And you say, okay, actually this theory is true. Okay, so there are some modifications, actually this theory is true, and so on. There was a great reliance on the human mind and on the arrogance of man himself, who acts as if he can figure everything out, when for thousands of years most people were ignorant of the world, of what's outside the world, of what's underneath the waters, and so on. I think the whole idea that you should assess these religious beliefs and religious statements and doctrines with empirical evidence, which is not what empirical evidence was actually developed for, I think that's a ridiculous idea. It is a very useless idea. It is an idea of arrogance, of narcissism that is very popular in today's time. And that also, by the way, I want to point out, I spent lots of time in skepticism, in free thinking, in trying to figure out what is most definitely true, what I know to be most definitely true. It also leads to a very, very empty and dark world where people are left with very shallow lives and the pursuit of happiness at the expense of meaning, and a complete lack of togetherness, a complete lack of hope. I have, after a decade of wandering in darkness, found my way to Christianity, and I must say all the pain, all the suffering, and everything has been alleviated, taken away. I feel a comfort, and it is very... I can't tell myself that I need to go back and just follow my mind and just trust my intelligence and find real meaning. It didn't lead me anywhere. It doesn't lead these people anywhere. See, he's gone. I wouldn't really rely in terms of religious beliefs on empirical evidence. And I've also found great meaning in following the Eastern way of the Eastern traditions of Christianity, where the reliance is more on mystery rather than on perfectly defining what God is, perfectly defining what Christianity is, perfectly defining on what the world is, rather relying on humility and on mystery and experiencing and enjoying and partaking in the beauty of the Christian faith. I find great hope and goodness.
Well done, AP. Well done, AP. Well done. Can they reply? Yeah. Go on, Tones.
I think you should always start by areas of agreement. It's a good way to go forward. I agree with my friends here that I think more generally, that their religion speaks to meaning and ethics and purpose. And a life lived which isn't cognizant of that transcendent element will be somewhat empty and fruitless. Yeah? So far we're on the same page.
All right.
I do think that then we've got the issue of empirical evidence to talk about, we've got Bob's question to me. Assuming the anecdotal evidence about St. Paul was correct, I'm happy to accept that he had a moment of ethical insight on the road to Damascus, where he realized he was being an oppressor, and he was inspired by the anecdotal evidence about the life of Christ. And the example of Christ's life to live a better life and turn around. Is that reasonable?
Do you want me to reply?
No, because I've got the third point down. You asked the question, that's my answer.
Okay.
If the anecdotal information about Paul is correct, then I'm happy to say that he had an ethical epiphany. Good for him, I applaud it. Right? To return to the issue, though, of you said that it was offensive. You implied that it was.
Yes, sir. Okay, be careful. Bring some water for the family.
Okay, fine. Now, I believe it can be. But my motive for asking is because I do believe it says in the Bible the truth is self. I do believe I should pursue the truth. But I do think, although empirical evidence can't answer all questions, it can inform some questions, and it's beholden on me to interface with empirical evidence when I can. Yeah? Is that reasonable?
Yeah, I would say that the point on narcissism and empirical evidence is not that that asking for evidence is narcissism. It is rather that that relying on empirical evidence is the ultimate factor on what is truth. Is in a way narcissistic. So trying to assess religious beliefs or religious claims based on the ultimate factor of empirical evidence, I would say, is a sort of reliance on narcissism, I would say.
Guys, can I just say, wait. Can I both encourage you to talk to everyone because there are people trying to listen?
Sorry.
Right, but wait, like, he said something about, have you finished your point?
Yeah.
You let him in, sorry. So, you said that I believe the anecdotal evidence about Paul that he had a moral epiphany.
I said if.
But that supported by the actual evidence that we have about Paul, that Paul had a moral epiphany, and that is what the anecdotal evidence says about him. On both of those points, the brother is wrong. He's just made it up. He's literally just invented it. Let's actually read about the conversion of Paul. In Acts chapter 9, this is the evidence about Paul's conversion. Now Saul, still breathing threats and murder against the disciples of the Lord, went to the high priest and asked for letters from him to the synagogues at Damascus, so that if he found any belonging to the way, both men and women, he might bring them bound to Jerusalem. As he was traveling, it happened that he was approaching Damascus, and suddenly a light from heaven flashed around him, and he fell to the ground and heard a voice saying to him, "Saul, Saul, why do you persecute me?" And he said, "Who are you, Lord?" And he said, "I am Jesus whom you are persecuting, but get up and enter the city, and it will be told to you what you must do." The men who traveled with him stood speechless, hearing the voice, but seeing no one. Saul got up from the ground, and though his eyes were open, he could see nothing, and leading him by the hand, they brought him into Damascus. In other words, ladies and gentlemen, the anecdotal evidence about Paul is not that he had a moral epiphany. Just ignore him, just block him and ignore him. He didn't have a moral epiphany, ladies and gentlemen. Just ignore the trolls. If you're new here, ignore them. He didn't have a moral epiphany, ladies and gentlemen. He experienced a miracle. He experienced a miracle that transformed him from persecutor to evangelist. And so my question stands. What happened to Paul to make him change his mind? If you don't believe it was a miracle, what was it, and what is the evidence for your claim?
Which I was trying to answer. Bob just did a very vocal and articulate version of the anecdotal evidence. Please bear in mind this is the anecdotal evidence.
Speak louder.
Yeah?
Louder. Talk to the brother at the back.
Talk to the brother at the back. That was a very vocal and articulate version of the anecdotal evidence, but as viewers, you've got to keep in your mind what you're hearing is anecdotal evidence. My initial point is about how you should contextualize that relative to other evidence which you're obligated to consider. Empirical evidence and inferential evidence. And evidence from your own soul and your own feeling and your own experience. You need to cross-reference all of this stuff, yeah? Now, all I said was, I think he had a moral epiphany. That doesn't mean it can't have been a divinely inspired moral epiphany, but I hope you concur with me that if someone's living a life where they're oppressing, torturing and killing people and they have a moment of insight where they go, I think I should improve my behaviour, that is a moral upgrade. Divinely inspired or not, it's not a moral downgrade. So again,
Talking in generic terms, did Paul hear a voice and see a light that blinded him?
okay, honest truth, because I believe the truth will set me free, and truth is the path to God. Total, which is what they've consistently bought for the most part, but they bought in some inferential. Empirical, they bought none, nor have I. Okay? Neither of us has bought any empirical evidence here. And inferential, which is what I did bring to bear and I'm bringing to bear now. What you're watching right now is a discourse in inference between two groups of people. We're not giving you any empirical evidence, we're not doing any predictive experiments with matter or energy, and okay, Bob is quoting anecdotal stuff to support his case, and that's not immaterial. I can only reiterate that when the different hierarchies of evidence come in conflict, for example, if half the people here, if everybody here tells me there's an elephant behind the tree, I should check it empirically, and if empirically there's no elephant, I can ignore your anecdotal evidence, yeah? However, imagine half the people here tell me there's an elephant, half the people tell me there isn't. Without me even doing an empirical test, I can, through inference, know, well, half the people here are wrong, yeah? That's the power of the tool of inference. You don't need empirical data in order to run the mill on certain inevitable consequences, yeah? And that power, the tool of inference is very, very powerful, and it can even transcend empirical evidence, and I could give examples.
I don't have my wallet,
Because the
only got my
universe we live in
phone.
cosmologically
And I left my
is
phone
very
here.
straight. So I'm not trying to shut down these guys' view, and I like their appeal to this. Apart from I'm slightly
I will end this
by the
live- I
fact
will
that
end
you
this
don't
live
see
stream.
Christianity, I think, as being ethically driven.
No, I guess
To
I
me,
water,
this
but
is
that's right. I get it.
I find that strange.
Okay, can I reply?
Please.
So, ladies and gentlemen, did you hear any evidence at all about Paul?
Nothing.
Nothing.
Zero.
Zero. He said he doesn't know, but what he's saying to you, is that you shouldn't believe that Paul experienced a miracle. I asked him a very simple question.
Which was?
What changed Paul's mind? And he said he doesn't know. Ladies and gentlemen, let's just be clear. Let's be clear. When it comes to claims about history, the brother doesn't know what constitutes empirical evidence. Because the book of Acts, as a historical document, does constitute empirical evidence in a historical discussion. And we are having an historical discussion, ladies and gentlemen. The reason why he doesn't want to wrestle with the evidence in Acts is because his agenda is to let's all talk about a blasé, grey, spiritual, ethical, let's all be one kind of spirituality.
Kind of love each other.
And he doesn't want to deal, with the actual evidence presented in front of him. Let's be clear. Paul was an enemy of the church. and he radically changed his mind. Now, ladies and gentlemen, we've all had this experience, have we not? Put your hand up if you have radically changed your perspective on something because of some kind of experience. Right? And do we all agree that you do remember, that you are sure about the thing that changed your mind? So when Paul testifies that he changed his mind because he saw Jesus, doesn't that constitute evidence of the highest order? No. After all, ladies and gentlemen, if you were to explain why you changed your mind, and then someone said, well, I can't believe you because your testimony is anecdotal, would you think, oh yeah, you've got a point? Or would you just think, you're a clown? I know what I experienced. The reality is, he doesn't want to engage with the evidence because the evidence forces him to believe in a metaphysical truth that he doesn't want to believe in. And if he doesn't have to pin his belief to the resurrection, he can continue going on spreading spiritual goop about how we're all really one and we all really believe the same thing and all religions are really the same and it's all just about love. Let him deal with the evidence in front of him and explain to us why why Paul changed his mind. And if he says he does not know, then let him engage with the evidence. Paul's testimony about his own experience